as I was thinking about what this introduction would be, the classic thing is to talk about each of them individually and their background. But the fact that they're both on stage is a reflection of the fact that these are the most ride or die co-founders that I have ever known. They have been co-founders across 2 companies dating back to 2013. 2009, 13 years. For 13 years across 2 companies. They met while studying industrial design at Art Center back in Pasadena, where I took painting class in high school. So I walked those hallowed halls that produced Jesse and Stephan. And they came into my life as co-founders of Lumi, which if anyone has done anything in and around e-commerce, you know Lumi. They really made a name for themselves by helping this kind of burgeoning e-commerce company create beautiful packaging and beautiful packaging experiences, and then reaching further and further back in the supply chain to help make that industry more accessible, more software-driven. Along the way, I think what is really special about Jesse and Adam is they also figured out how to tell the story of Jesse and Stephan, sorry. They figured out how to tell the stories of those companies and of those vendors, and to bring the public and people in that world truly into the world. They started a podcast called the Well Made Podcast that tells the stories of kind of the builders and how things are built. And I didn't realize this, but it's in the top 1% of podcast listenership nationwide, which is bananas. For those many years of building Lumi, I think Jesse was shooting content about packaging every Sunday for 7 years. She was in the warehouse. She lived in an Airstream in the back parking lot of their office for at least the first 5 years. So when I say ride or die co-founders, so deeply connected to each other, to their friendship, and to their businesses and the community that their business was in. So they also just had Lumi acquired by Narvar, where Jesse is now VP of packaging and Stephan is continuing to lead product for Lumi there under the kind of Narvar umbrella. And I wanted to invite them to talk about a part of the acquisition process that is really rarely discussed, which is the personal and emotional side of getting your company acquired, this baby that you've built. And so, sometimes that story is really all about the dollars, and we think about, the upside and what have you. And I think as founders, we don't get the chance to peek inside the personal, emotional side. So I'll invite you guys up to share that story with us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Wow.
That was such a generous and incredible intro. Thank you so much. So something that made us very excited to speak with you all today, and something that we want to share, is sort of the raw candor of our relationship. We're going to go over some questions and stuff that we haven't even fully discussed together. So we're going to find out what we feel. But also, something that made us excited to talk about this is that the subject of selling a company and starting a new chapter after founding a company is so under-discussed. It's actually wild just how much incredible content there is around starting a company. But if there were starting companies every day, something is happening to these companies, and that feels very under-discussed. There's a variety of reasons, and something I learned about selling a company is that one of those reasons is that you often feel like you're sharing other people's information, that you can't discuss the exact details of everything because it's proprietary to someone else, or it's someone else's story, or you don't want to explain the process for the team and make it about yourself. So we're going to do away with all of those things here in this magical place and try to discuss it as candidly as we can.
Yeah, and as Kate mentioned, I host a podcast called Well Made. So this is a mini Well Made, a 30-minute version. If you want to ask questions or shout something at any point, feel free to go for it. But I haven't seen Jessie in a little bit because she's been on maternity leave. You might have seen her and her baby roaming around earlier, who's very cute. But we got acquired, and she was like, "See you later." I'm having a baby. Well, it wasn't unexpected exactly, but I'm living nomadically, so make sure that the integration with Narvar goes well. See you later. And so we're actually seeing each other now for the first time in a couple months, and I actually have lots of questions for you that I don't know the answer to. So one of them, which is, as Kate mentioned, we've been co-founders for 13 years. The entire time you've been the CEO of a company. How does it feel to not be the CEO of a company? Just like, I feel like that's part of your identity in a way. Well,
I just start crying immediately.
I don't know. Is this an actual question? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, and these are things we have not discussed. It actually has been...
Just as a reminder, we have not discussed this.
Yeah. Just full disclosure. It's been honestly, there was aspects that were extremely liberating, and then aspects that were extremely terrifying. The liberating part, I remember the first all hands that I attended on the Narvar team, and they run this like really great all hands, but effectively I was like giggling to myself that I was not running this meeting. Like, it was so funny to me that I didn't need to run this meeting, like that I was just coming to a meeting. Like, I've never just come to a meeting. Like, it was like, so I was just like, I don't have to run this, like when there's like a hard-hitting Q&A, like it's not directed at me, like, so there was almost like this comedic factor to that for me. But then the other piece is sort of terrifying in a way where you do start attaching your identity to these different components of running a company. And I had been a CEO for 13 years, and then now you just like one day you just like are not. I think I'm dealing with that totally fine. I'm fine. I'm okay. But it was like, it's sort of like a reckoning, like a true like chapter change.
And one of the things that we didn't talk too much about, but prior to Lumi, we started a company called Ango that was actually bootstrapped through Kickstarter, where's Clarissa?
Yeah.
But like that was such a formative moment. And I think when you were describing like us being ride or die, I don't know if I think about our relationship that way. Like every step of the way from like now to 13 years later has been very like gradual and organic. And people sometimes ask me like, how do you find a co-founder? And it sounds like it's such an intense question, and I never know how to answer that question, because it's like we just sort of happened to be in school together, then we sort of started this project, then it kind of bootstrapped into a company, and then like that snowball just kept going.
Yeah.
Like, how do you answer that question for people sometimes?
I also feel unable to answer that for other people, in the sense that our process was so organic. But one joke I tell is that in a way someone will say, like, how did you two decide to start a company together? And I would say, we never did.
Right.
We did it. We somehow started two companies. We never decided to start a company together. It was very organic. We're working on a problem, and we decided to, it like happened as we went. But the other, in effect, something that I know you've thought a lot about, that I'm curious to hear your perspective on, is Stephan is someone, I'll explain first. Stephan is someone where when I would, as CEO, and you were running product, I would say, show me, can we go over the roadmap? How long does our roadmap extend? And Stephan, with a complete serious expression on her face, would say, 50 years. And I was like, we have a board meeting coming, I really just need like 6 months, bro. Like, and so this is true.
I feel like you're throwing me under the bus here.
But I'm sharing this with everyone to ask you a question, which is, knowing that you had and have like a 50-year roadmap, how did it feel to you for us to make this decision to like lose some control of that roadmap? Like Lumi has continued forward, but it's part of a larger org, and so we have inherently less control. It's going in a very cool direction, but as the keeper of the roadmap, how does that feel to you?
Well, it's a lot less out of my control to some extent, but I think there is a direction that it can go. I think what's interesting, we're here in the Long Now Foundation, bar. I've been a member of this organization now for like 4 or 5 years, and I love that. I mean, this like library, I actually haven't had a chance to look at it, is like the books that are needed to restart the Earth. And like one of the things that you said very early on in like the Lumi was like, we want to make something that's essential. Like we want to be a product and a service that like companies completely rely on, because we can build a great customer base out of that. And the suppliers in our marketplace are companies that are manufacturers. They are, I thought the presentation from Jason and Fido was like called to mind a lot of similar feelings that we have, where they think about farmers that way, we think about manufacturers that way. The manufacturers in our community are literally growing trees that are gonna take 20 to 30 years to grow so that they can turn them into cardboard to make boxes like for the people in 2060. And that actually like goes back to like something Stuart Brand was talking about and like the new Beams of Oak College, if you've ever seen that kind of talk, just like planning on that type of horizon. And software is weird because we haven't been building software that long. Like one of the things that I've always been fascinated with is a page on Wikipedia that you can go find, which is the list of the oldest companies in the world. And on that list, you're gonna find, I mean, they basically are in 3 categories. They're like alcohol. So like the longest running companies in the world are all like making beer or sake or wine.
Just consistent
They're mostly German. Yeah, I don't, it tells you something about what people like over long periods of time. So booze is like very high up there. Then there's like hotels and bars and things that are kind of in that area, like that are places in a physical space where that like place can be handed over, from generation to another. And then you have like this long tail of like manufactured goods, and that starts kind of like 1700s and so on. Yeah, these companies are like 400 or 500 years old that have been around. Like there's literally tens of thousands of companies that still exist, especially in Germany and Japan, who've been operating for 400 or 500 years. So then we think about Baukunst and like the VC funding cycle, and we're thinking on a 10-year track. How do you take like a plan that you might have for hundreds of years and distill it into something that can be started from scratch and deliver some sort of return to a set of investors? And tech, like if you want to ask yourself like what are the tech companies like that are the oldest, you can kind of look at it in a couple different ways. Like some are accidentally the oldest almost, like Nokia has been around since the 1800s. I don't know if you know this, but like they started making galoshes.
And then they pivoted straight to flip phones. Yeah.
There was like there was a moment where they were like galoshes. We know exactly how to make flip phones. And then Nintendo's been around since the 1800s. Nintendo was a playing card company. But like recently you read, your baby's named Ford.
Yeah.
You read, I think relatedly, the biography of Henry Ford, and that's like one of our oldest tech companies. I just want to finish this point, but it's like, that's like a 100-year startup.
Yeah.
Like Ford was a startup that still exists. We have like GE maybe that's kind of on that same time scale. What did it mean to, like that's how I was thinking.
Yeah.
What do we need to build in the next, sprint for 2 weeks that helps us build something for the next year, that helps us build something that literally changes the way the world operates as like a manufacturing machine in 100 years from now? That's how I was thinking.
I'll answer one of your questions there. Henry Ford's a complicated character, very divisive. So I didn't technically name my child after him, but then basically, actually, this will give you insight into how I think. I named him that, and then I was like, whoa, I should know more about Henry Ford. Like totally after. Interesting choice, very divisive person. But anyway, it is fascinating to think in that time scale where that was a tech startup, and then now we don't even think of it in that lens at all. But I'm going to kind of dig in again. Actually, you didn't fully answer my question.
Yeah.
No,
Sorry,
I'm going to ask it a different way. Well, I'm going to ask a question that's like a trick question. During the process of, you have the City Road RIA roadmap, then we make this decision to sell the company, which was very iterative, by the way. We didn't decide like one day. If anyone is super honest about their acquisition story, it isn't like one day like, you know what is it we should do? Sell the company. Like it comes to you as an idea, through conversations, understanding that there is even the opportunity to do so. So it's sort of like an awakening. So the trick question is, in this whole awakening process of us figuring this out, were any tears? Did you cry?
Sure, of course I cried. But I think.
But about what? So like actually just kind of like try to drill down for a sec. Like what is the thing that would bring a tear to your eye about it?
Well, I think And I think there's like everyone's familiar with the term the bus factor. Like if someone gets hit by a bus in your organization, like how much knowledge like goes away. And like that's my biggest fear still with Lumi. Like there's some things that I'm the only person who has like the knowledge of how to run certain parts of the code base and different things. And so I want to make sure that that gets handed over, but I also want to make sure that more people can be part of like the broader goal of what we were building.
Yep.
And I think when you're a smaller startup, like you're putting all of your wood behind one arrow. And that's the right thing to do. You have to have like all your eggs in one basket to some extent until maybe like Series C or D or something where you can start to diversify. And the most attractive thing about being part of a bigger company was like having more than one leg to stand on. But with that, you're giving away something, which is like some piece of control over where the direction of it is actually going.
Yeah. So was that the thing that brought it to your TI?
Pretty much.
Yeah, just that change, and knowing that, and so something I also shed tears, but at various points, like sometimes of actual happiness, but what I would distill down of why, like what is the actual jarring component, the thing for me was actually an identity component. It wasn't just, as Stephan said, like, are you still a CEO? Like, what does that mean? It actually, I think, is a deeper level of, not about my title, but when you start a company, I really drank the Kool-Aid that, like, you should persevere through literally anything. And you should always be the person who's thinking the biggest and has the most confidence in what you're doing. In every circumstance, like, there's just no excuse for not being that, waking up being that, going to sleep being that for the team. And so like actually fully believing in every fiber and every cell of your body that you can build like a multi-billion-dollar like company that goes public and all of these things. So how do you reconcile like drilling that into literally every cell in your body with then making the decision that best actually course forward for the product and the team? And legitimately, the thing that you're trying to build is actually becoming part of another really fascinating organization. That was like a really like weird sandwich for me, like because I spent so much time. It was like my sandwich like became a panini press. I was just sort of like I had to squish like these disparate ideas together, and like. And that actually was a bigger identity problem for me than anything relating to title. It was like, is this? Am I selling anything short? Did I hire someone like within the last 6 months and look them in the white of the eyes and say, we are doing X, Y, Z, and then am I changing that now, like in this moment? Those tougher things were actually like the part that got me emotionally. The easier part was that from a rational perspective of the thing we set out to do, which is like empower suppliers and e-commerce brands to connect and do great work together, this becoming part of Navarre makes that better. Like that's why we did it, right? And so it's like, so that part was easier. Like there's no tears shed over that. It was like this other deeper component of like, you drink the Kool-Aid so much and you became so dedicated to telling everyone like there's just this one track that it feels like deviating from that at all is like, did I make a mistake? Did I mess something up? Like, am I no longer perseverant enough? Like, am I just not enough of something? Anyway, like that's like the deeper part. And I'm so over it. I'm just kidding. I just keep making jokes about that. No, I really do feel like I've fully reconciled that, which is why we did the deal. And I truly believe that the path forward for the product is better. But I'm just admitting that is hard to reconcile.
There was, I think the closest moment to when we actually decided to form Lumi came around like late 2014. And one thing that we did was we had bootstrapped our first company and we were trying to decide whether we wanted to take on investors. We ended up going through Y Combinator, but we went on like a tour of all of the smartest people that we knew, as entrepreneurs in the tech company.
Them,
and some of them we knew personally, and some we kind of knew from friends of friends. And so we I'm not gonna like out anybody, but we went to New York and met with like a famous entrepreneur, and he listened to us, and we were explaining what we were trying to do, and he was like, basically, if you do this and you go down the path of VC, you're gonna hate each other. It's gonna end in tears.
Yeah.
Or what else did he say? Like.
He told us we were imagine us, like, I'm already pretty like enthusiastic stuff, but imagine just like a little baby version of me just telling someone my idea and just being like,
Here's
it's
my
so
dream.
great. I have so many dreams, and here's my best friend. And then this person was literally like, no, like you're gonna hate your best friend if you do this. Investors are gonna like crap all over you. Just telling us this
And it
really
was,
like dark, sludgy version.
To me, it felt like a prophecy, like, because we were gonna do that, we were gonna go start the company anyway.
Yeah.
And so I was like, the whole time I was basically, I've been thinking about that.
Oh, I've been
every
thinking it was
week the entire time.
impactful. Like it was impactful because this person said it. I think it's a vivid memory for me too, because we were like best friends. Like we on this tour of like, let's get like ramped up, excited to start this business. And it was like one of the first things he said. He sat down and he said, "If you do this, you two will fucking hate each other." And we were just like, like
that was his. I mean, that was his experience.
Yeah, it was his experience.
In starting and ending his journey of his company, which ended in a very dramatic way.
Yeah.
But I think that it became a priority to me in my mind that didn't happen.
I do.
So in a way, it was actually really helpful.
It was like an anti-prophecy, yeah, because he said that to us, and so we would actually talk about this when there was moments when we were like extremely, like when we had disagreements or anything in the company, we would be like, remember, like we can't let that be right. Like we would use that moment as an anti-example of like, we're not those people. We will not hate each other. It was almost like we agreed that we won't hate each other. We're just like, let's not hate each other, but like aggressively, like even when we were really upset. And I think that was formative, and something that you said, the other kind of like really emotional moment of going through this process, something you said that really stuck with me was we get to just be friends again.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the most interesting part about having sold the company.
And that, because as everyone probably here knows, running companies all-consuming, starting anything, running anything is all-consuming. And so we were effectively like, every time we were together, like let's just say we went to a movie. I mean, Stephan knows this because, I was the CEO, so I was usually the one where like we would just be at a movie and I'd be like, did you see this email? And like I would just be like the one constantly like probably super unhealthily like pulling us back into like everything at all moments, like walking a dog or like whatever we were doing. And so Stephan was like really reflected that this chapter change allows us to step back into a different part of our relationship. We've been friends the whole time, but there was like always something more urgent than the friendship, and this chapter change, we're taking on new roles. We're still working at Lumi within Narvar, but even the simple things of accounting and HR and things being handled by the larger org change our relationship. Like I'm no longer this CEO in that way. Like people are not blowing up my phone at midnight about something that I need to call Stephan about. Yada yada yada.
But that was a priority that I had, which I think is probably I would hope that on any co-founder. That to me, our friendship was more important than Lumi as a company. And so I think that maybe not every co-founder team can have that, but I think that was really important to me.
I think that what that speaks to, and this also helped add clarity to in that emotional process of making a decision to sell a company, the other component is getting alignment with all the people involved is a huge part of the emotional component. Getting, co-founder if you have one, investors if you have them, and like basically the people who have been ride or die, which is more than just Stephan. Like we have really early investors who've been super formative, not just to the company, but to me as a person. Like they have been formative, like they helped me know what board meetings are. I know many of these things are really important to Kate and this team as well. Like helping an entrepreneur like become themselves over the course of running that company with them. And we had people like that involved. And so the emotional part is wondering like, did I do everything? Like you want to feel as an entrepreneur like you truly left everything out on the field. Like that there was just like nothing you could have done that you're just like your heart and soul is just like out there in every different way. And I think that hot take would be that sensation actually sometimes really clouds your vision about what is a good outcome and what is a rational path forward for a product. And something that helped, again, actually referencing the talk from earlier, something that helped clarify that for me was actually thinking about our manufacturers, because there was this path forward is actually great for our customers and our manufacturers, the retailers and manufacturers, because the product is thriving and also growing and scaling in a different way than we would have done independently. And so in a way, like, it was like an ego drop of like, do you know what's more important than me, like, feeling 1001% like I left something on the field, or like any of these sensations I'm sharing with you? Do you know what's more important than that? Is us actually like doing the thing and the people who use the thing getting what they need continually, and that growing and thriving. And so sometimes those things diverge. Like, that is a weird thing to admit, but sometimes those things diverge. Like, we didn't start Lumi so that Jessie could feel like she left it all on the field, right? Like, that's not the why behind Lumi. The why was deeper, relating to manufacturers and the brands. And so, like, I do still feel that way, but I'm just sort of admitting, like, those two things actually separate a little bit. And I think it is rational to make a decision for your customers and the mission that you started with. But again, that whole culture around just like startups have a beginning, but they somehow like, they just all have magical beginnings.
Well,
and then there's like what, and then
that reminds me, I think that like we did things differently with Lumi than we did with Inkodai, in terms of like, in the same way that Inkodai never really had a beginning, it didn't really have an end. Like, there wasn't a moment where it ended. It was just like this long petering out. There was a feeling that we had where we had sort of like mission accomplished, like done what we had set out to do with building this like printing process that people could do at home. And when we started to look at what that company should become, like the comparables were all of these companies that we didn't really have any interest in becoming. They were like art supply manufacturers who were like building out these portfolios of products.
Yeah.
And instead we kind of got distracted with this like shiny new idea and let that other one just sort of gradually die, when we could have maybe sold it and had some sort of liquidity or something. Like, how did that influence your mindset around like what exit could look like for Lumi?
I think that's a great point, and we didn't have as much clarity of like how that decision should be made in the first business, because there was also it was not venture backed and things like that. So it was like many different endings were potentially more palatable. But what we effectively did, I think, was a poor business decision in that first business, where we just let demand peter out while we got distracted with a new idea. I mean, that's literally what we did. And in reality, there was these craft supply companies who actually were interested in acquiring the product. And at the time, I would say I had sensations that I think many entrepreneurs have, that I'll try to articulate without being like, I don't know, it could sound weird or negative. I think that we're kind of suspicious of people. Like, I think that as founders, you're sort of like, I have this perfect little thing. If you want to talk to me about it, they're like interested in it as like buying it. Like, I don't know, like this is my little thing. Like, and a little bit like, I think that it's normal to want to continue growing it yourself, because that's why you started. But also, I think that it is rational to be like, what's your interest? Like, why? What's the thing that you think is high leverage, or what would you do with it? In the first business, I didn't ask any of those questions. I was just like suspicious, like weirdly suspicious about why they wanted to talk or engage. And I think that was like me effectively like being immature.
We had a lot of copycats in that business.
Yeah, we had a lot of copycats, yeah. So, but again, we're in the scheme of where we are and thinking about the future of humanity and things like that. I was suspicious of like talking to a fabric dye company about my fabric dye formula. Like, I don't know. It doesn't make any sense, you guys. Like, basically, I think it was really like kind of my own entrepreneurial immaturity. And what I did wrong from my perspective in the macro sense is, do you know what doesn't exist now? That product. It's off the market. Why? Because the people who started it stopped paying attention to it and started something else. That's why that product's not on the market. So there's people who use the product, really like small group of people in the world. They can't get that product anymore. And so I think that's like the zoom out. Like, you should be more obsessed, from my perspective, total like my perspective. You should be more obsessed with seeing that mission through, seeing your product grow and thrive, seeing the group of people whose problem you're trying to solve continue having that problem solved, that should be a deeper obsession than like, what did people think of me when I did X? Like, what did they think of me when I sold the company or when I even entertained it? Did they think I wasn't, in it enough? Or like basically those thoughts are like a little cloudy compared to like what you set out to do. That's my learning.
And actually, every piece of feedback that I've gotten since then from customers, manufacturers, random friends has been positive, and like everyone's
They're
super excited
literally
about it.
so
a lot
excited.
of it is just like in your head.
That's like we have these like
That fear.
stories playing in our heads about ourselves, and something that I believe as a person that has also helped me probably with like through many years of exec coaching or whatever else is that the world is very agnostic to you as an individual in a good way. Like that could be sort of depressing or something like, oh, people don't care, but actually like think of it this way. People don't care. Like, it's all in the spin, of that. And so that means like, what's more deeply affecting to, what's my effect on the world? Is it that someone somewhere at some point might be like, Jessie Genet, could she have grown that company further on her own? Or is it the fact that every day hundreds and thousands of manufacturers and brands are buying packaging on this platform? Narvar and us are investing in it together to make it even things I didn't even imagine myself. Like clearly the answer is like more interesting, more impactful. But but the narrative in your head sometimes like actually pulls you off that track.
Do we want to open things up? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone have any questions? We're happy to keep freestyling as well.
I have a question. What about regrets? So you sell the company, you agonize, I wish I had made this hire, I wish I hadn't made this hire,
Yeah.
I wish I had invested in the software.
Yeah.
Did you reflect on that?
Yeah, Stephan is like the king of postmortem reports. So like whether you ask for them or not, like you get like a 20-page report about like he wrote like a postmortem for me about he's written postmortems for me about many of my choices. They're usually highly critical.
No, that's not exactly.
No.
That's just I'm writing it and you're sitting nearby and I'm like, do you just want to read this if you want?
Yeah.
Like I'm not writing it in that particular way.
So
I just write a lot.
the quick answer is that yes, like I think that you have these moments, but to me the most healthy way to process those moments or like those thoughts are to like I'm making fun, but also like to actually document, learn, and move on. Think to yourself like basically instead of I think that true like entrepreneurs, like dyed-in-the-wool entrepreneurs, there will be things that you do next in your life. You will also use your entrepreneurial skills within Narvar, like you'll use them. And so any lesson you learned, the only thing that's sad about a lesson learned is not changing that next decision. That's the only reason to be sad. So if you're going to keep making decisions inside a new company, in a new entity, then why be sad? It's like you just learned something. Like that's my perspective. And so that makes regret like impossible, which is convenient.
I like that answer.
Hello, hi. I have two questions actually. The first one is the easy one. When you sell the company, do you feel more like a closure, or do you feel like another beginning?
Yeah.
The second part of the question is, I heard a lot about company acquisition. Then you have this culture, right, thing that how do you integrate and how do you transform? So that's a two-part question. Thank you.
The best analogy that another entrepreneur shared with me is that an acquisition is like you're playing a video game and it's like you hit save game. Like you're not done with the game. And you're not like you just had this moment to click save game, like, and that's smart. But that's all it is. Like basically, it's not an end, it's not a beginning. It's just a save game moment. That's
checkpoint.
Yeah, just a checkpoint. So that I think is a cool mentality. And then on the second question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is the only acquisition that we've had, and we're lucky to be part of a company that is basically, a couple stages ahead of us. Like there were 350 to 400 people at the time, and they're growing quickly. So it's not like we got acquired by a company with 10,000 or 50,000 people. And their culture, the reason we wanted to sell to them was that they had a culture that felt very akin. We had a lot of other interested parties out there where like we had a choice to go with a company where we felt actually culture was one of the highest priorities, that they would be able to kind of like take what we built, help foster it, help us grow it and also like be a good steward of it in the long term.
So I think having realistic expectations and actually optimizing for that. I think that many stories you hear about people being unhappy post a deal, they've maybe they think that they could change something. Like effectively, yeah, companies have cultures, and I think we picked a company and they picked us that where there is a good mesh already. It's like natural.
Yeah, you don't always have that luck necessarily.
Sure.
That was lucky for us.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's very powerful, and I can see how emotional it could be. My question would be, I think at the time you mentioned that it's a gradual kind of decision-making process, but then were there any trigger event or there any particular factor that made up your mind that you're going to sell your company? What the biggest challenge at the time that make you made up your mind? Yeah.
I would say that what I said earlier about having more than one leg to your stool is the best analogy that I have for that. And I think that, I mean, Lumi is in the supply chain space. If you're reading about supply chain anytime in the past couple of years, it's been a pretty bad, it's like pretty challenging time. And so like having resiliency is also something that like changed my perspective on acquisition. Like for a long time, my perspective of where we should go is like stay independent as long as possible, try to IPO maybe, something like that. But as I thought about that in the context of what we do, having stability in terms of having different parts of your business that work together became more important to me in terms of can this thing continue to exist in the long term, having that resiliency. So I think that was the mindset change that kind of happened for me over the past like year or two. Another
thing that I've talked to other entrepreneurs about who have been considering selling their companies or different things and have sought me out or talked to me in some way, is that basically the only thing that's like anathema to like running a business is standing still. Like that's not, you can't stand still. Like you are in a rushing stream. Like so, I think that decisions trump like stasis, and if you decide what you're prioritizing, like the future of the product and stuff, you need to keep making decisions. So that would be one of my answers though to your question, because a business needs to keep doing things. Like if you aren't doing this deal, then you're fundraising, then this, then that. So you can't just explore and think about it. You don't have that much time to ruminate. Would be my other like addition there.
Hi, thank you. Just a question. It seems like the hardest thing for both of you is giving up control of what you've done for the last 10, 15 years. Where has the maybe surrendering at the professional level kind of seeped into your life on the personal level?
There was one time we did like a group coaching session, and like I forget his name, but he had like this framework where it's like, what's the most important thing to you? Like money, control, or what was the third thing? I can't even remember. To me, control is like at the top. Like I really like having like an artistic vision. Like I wanted to like bring poetry to supply chain. Like to me, that was the most important thing, rather than like money or status. I think that was like the third one. So changing that over time, I mean, it's pretty similar to what I said before. It's like, if, to me, control is like at the top of my personal goals, like as a creative entrepreneur, like I want to make sure that creation continues to persist. And so that's how my perspective changed. But if you're like very money optimized, like I know founders who are like serial entrepreneurs who think about their business in terms of how am I going to sell this company? And I just don't, that's just not my DNA. I don't have that method of like, that part of my brain that exists.
So something that relates to talking about the formation of an incredible new fund and things of that nature, though, too, is I think as entrepreneurs we need to have self-awareness that when we take, when we have the privilege of getting venture investment into our businesses, I think it is like effectively a stated mission of like, I'm going to focus on this mission above like whether I prioritize control or not. Like I do think there's a little bit of like, that's fair is fair, like fair play. And so to us, like, I would say that it's okay to subservient a little bit the like, our product continues on, that's the promise we made when we launched this business, and that's what we were like trying to do. So like changes in our personal lives are like minimal compared to that. It was like sort of how we feel, but also in the scheme of things, these are all pretty minimal changes. The thing that's cool, really exciting about the deal that we were able to do is that Lumi is a division within this company and it's continuing on. So I'm sure there are more extreme and less extreme scenarios than that.
So Jesse, I thought it was really interesting to hear you talk about, particularly kind of in the first business, wanting to serve those customers in the long term, even kind of beyond the energy you were able to give it. And sort of the counterpoint to that is, well, okay, but your time and energy is valuable and finite and yours, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm kind of curious how you thought or maybe coped with balancing what was best for you and allowing yourself to be selfish about what you want to extract from the experience versus the customers or the company or the fiduciary duties or what have you.
You're asking whether you're getting like the PR version of that as well. I think, which is kind of funny. I agree. Like basically, that's a tough thing to balance. Is a super honest answer there. And but in a way they bleed together for me because you can't do good work if you are not personally happy. And so effectively, I'm always like, I referred to that panini press earlier, like I force these concepts together. Like that one way of doing that is just being really direct and open with everyone, meaning that even when we go through this process, saying like, here's how I imagine this to be. Here's how, like really bringing everyone involved in the new equation up to speed so that you can get to keep doing good work and also have the personal life that you feel like you need to have. Is there a recipe for that? No, but I would say self-awareness helps.
Yeah, I mean, at the very end of Ango Die, we did Shark Tank, and Jesse did Shark Tank specifically, and I think that
without mentioning.
We don't have to go into the whole story of it, but they had been asking us like several years in a row, will you do it? Will you do it? And I think like part of us kind of knew that it actually aired after we had shut down the business, which is funny. But I think the reason that you really like wanted to do it was just like I just want to know what it would be like. Like I'm curious what it is. And like I didn't particularly by that point like I didn't really care either way, but like we weren't going on there to try and actually like we weren't going to be sad if we did get a deal, but there was so much learning out of like what is it to put like a TV show together where you have like an entrepreneur who goes and talks to Mark Cuban or whatever, and like that was just a curiosity that was like purely selfish almost.
And something out of that experience that I really reflected on was the only reason not to do it was that maybe we'd be embarrassed. And something that was actually a formative moment then that I've carried through is you personally potentially being a little bit embarrassed is not good enough of a reason to not go out there and do what you should do for your business. It's just not a good enough reason. Get over it. Do the thing. Maybe you're a little embarrassed, like whatever. But effectively, I think that I've come to that, and I feel that way. Like that's helpful for me going forward too.
Cool.
Amazing. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
And congratulations.